Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of CRO Wisdom, the voice of risk leaders. I'm delighted to have Phil Bennett today. Phil comes with a deep background in third party and cyber risk from companies such as Capital One and Navy Federal Credit Union. Phil, welcome.
Thanks, Atul. Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So, Phil, a question that I always start with is, always curious about how people's journeys start in their specific area of expertise. So how did your career start in the risk management space?
Oh, well, thank you. That's a great question. I was fortunate not having a background educationally in risk or technology to grow organically with a younger company that was just starting out in risk management practices. And my focus area was with a growing information security focus in both project management and then especially in third-party risk management, which is where I spent most of my career time and establishing the processes and best practices. And also, just because at that time, the time when I came through, which is way too long ago, we sort of, together with yourself and others, colleagues across the financial sector, which is where I've spent most of my time with risk management, sort of learned what the examiners and what the regulators and others were expecting, what internal audit practices with respect to sort of broadening the risk management focus from credit models only to cybersecurity controls and third-party oversight. So we all sort of, as an industry, grew up together and defined it. Now there are, as you know, practitioners out there who've come through university programs on these topics, and so it's a kind of a different landscape now. But that's how I came through.
Yeah, it's the hard knocks style, kind of, right? Learning on the job for sure.
Absolutely, which has a lot of benefit because you kind of learn from the ground up in a very practical way. And you've heard me say very frequently, it is the practical implementation that is important to me because I've seen where you have the theory, you have the best practices, the aspirational practices, but then there's the reality of getting budget. There's the reality of training resources. There's the reality of finding the right model and framework with which to practice that makes sense within not just your industry sector, but also within your organization culturally. And so I think, to consider all of those aspects is vital to success in risk management.
Right. So Phil, let's bring that to today. So when you think about 2021 and programs 2021, what are some of your priorities in this new risk environment?
Yeah, when I think about where the industry is going and where the needs are, in an ever in evolving threat landscape, I think where the focus really is being able from a risk management point of view to incorporate some of the nuances that are coming to bear and coming to the forefront. Maybe they always should have been there, but we're giving more focus either because of our own culture, organizational culture, or because of greater heightened focus in the world. We think about ESG matters as becoming very important and considering those ESG matters, not just for the organization, but also for third parties, for the supply chain ecosystem. We think about areas of which we've always known popped up through time, but social unrest. Climate is having a very specific impact on many industry sectors and will continue to grow in its impact. And so I think that in my area of cybersecurity, but especially in supply chain risk management matters, to creatively start incorporating those matters into your oversight procedures and risk management procedures, and again, very practical ways, and
Yeah.
measured ways. How do you measure success?
Yeah.
How do you measure what you're doing? Even if you are able to find the baseline. And so I think that that's an area in 2021 that will really come to the forefront and has for us.
So, Phil, you make a great point in terms of widening the risk aperture. And as you said, looking at these other risk categories like ESG and social unrest, kind of geopolitical and others. One of the other things we've been seeing, particularly COVID made it very live, was moving beyond point in time risk management to really a continuous monitoring, continuous intelligence approach. Phil, how do you think, first of all, what are you seeing in that change? And secondly, how do you think companies ought to be adopting it? How do they move into a model like that?
Yeah, it's fascinating over the last 10 years, as you know, being a CEO of a company that, that works in this space. And as I've seen these capabilities develop, I'm seeing the industry come to grips with, well, what does it mean? Initially, there was the initial sort of bracing from the targets of the continuous monitoring tools on, oh, well, this is not substantiated information. These are false positives, that kind of, sort of pushback that we get. Well, then as the tools became more mature and there was a little bit more understanding in how the tools should be used and how the data coming out of the tools should be considered, it has become a great best practice to really consider this as another intelligence feed that is more focused on the supply chain that can really enhance your point in time assessment. So the way that I've worked through it as a best practice in organizations I've worked through was really to consider it's not a replacement of point in time assessments. Um, Ongoing monitoring, similar to the old annual health check, financial check for an organization, has become part and parcel of the assessment process. So now, as I walk out of the door after having done a third party assessment, let's say a cybersecurity or compliance assessment, now I have these other tools that have increased. So it's my point in time assessment plus my ability to get indications of potential areas that I might want to inquire back to my third party on. On the aspect that's being indicated. So I like to, to think about the output of the continuous and ongoing monitoring solutions as giving me indications of areas where I may want to inspect a little bit further. And in a second area, it really does help come back to inform the assessment, the point in time assessment. So there may not be a escalated matter that I might want to take immediately to a third party, but also, when I do go on site, maybe I take, in my test scripts a little more informed information to talk about patch management, to talk about cycles of change and how I have secured my environment or how the third party has secured their environment.
I think, Phil, it's a really good way to make your whole life cycle a lot more efficient and effective by actually thinking of these two as a cycle and not just as kind of separate ways of doing it, which is assessment and continuous monitoring.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And, you can't, there's another principle, as you know, that comes into play. I can't boil the ocean. I am setting thresholds appropriately, but also, as you know, as a practitioner in this space, you have to have a solid inherent risk model that informs where you're going to apply your continuous monitoring. And it can be twofold. One is, I can evidence in my sector, I can evidence that I am paying using today's tools and technologies to apply appropriate, deeper oversight for my top 10 or 20 third parties. Also, maybe because I'm paying for that additional service from a budget point of view, I may move some money over into that deeper inspection with a more broad, lens critical lens, if you will, while at the same time, maybe because I am monitoring at a higher level the back end, the long tail of the supply chain, if you will, I'm able to lessen my frequency of on-site visits, which saves me a bunch of money as I don't, pay for, airline tickets and all of that. And so I can back off of, when we do after COVID are able to visit third parties
Yeah.
again, to be able to still get comfort level that I'm monitoring appropriately the back end through these additional capabilities that ongoing continuous monitoring provide to me. And so it really can become a budget play as well, so that I'm not going to the tail for more, for more money.
Yeah.
I can adjust my money in an intelligent way, you leveraging continuous monitoring tools, and I found that very effective.
Yeah, Phil, you just answered a question that I often get, which is, how do I deal with assessments if I can't go on site? So, you just described a great way of being able to use continuous monitoring to maybe lessen the load on and reliance on that. But they, of course, still form a part of your program, but be more effective this way.
It is, and it also solves for a side issue that we in the financial sector have, and our key vendors have been focused on for, as you know, last 15 years, and that is sort of having a little bit more shared assessments or collaborative assessments that we share. Well, it sort of in a side way achieves that goal of lessening the impact to the vendors if I'm doing my part to find some other creative ways to monitor their cyber health, especially and
Yeah.
other aspects of their legal environment and financial health in other ways independently.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Phil, one of the things in risk management companies realized over COVID was this whole aspect of cascading risk, right? Where something may start as a financial risk and ends up impacting people and cyber risk. But in a lot of companies, these portions of risk management, kind of financial risk of their third parties, cyber risk of their third parties, compliance, often may be coming from disparate systems and being handled and seen by different parts of the organization. And so the realization has been is kind of we need an integrated view of my third parties. Any thoughts on kind of how to do that and the importance of it? Any ideas appreciated?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I have observed and I think are important in this space. One is to approach depending upon who you are as a practitioner in this space. Think about your organization, its size, its maturity, and its complexity. We all have worked in, Atul, you and me and others in this practice have worked at various sized organizations. And the answer to this question is different for different organizations.
Okay.
I may be a single performer across procurement and cybersecurity and third-party management, compliance, and so understand the organization in which you work as a practitioner in this space. I think that the intelligence that we're getting, if I am a mature organization that has a procurement department, distinct from a cybersecurity function that maybe inputs assessment tests into oversight for vendors, together with a separate legal department, then and a separate cybersecurity department that includes a CSOC, right, a threat intelligence.
Yeah.
Then then my focus is to make sure that I am building relationships with each of those functions and communicating with them two ways. So in a continuous monitoring solution, as an example, typically it might be considered a cybersecurity operations center function to monitor using these kinds of tools. Well, often that's not the case. Right now, it is often the third-party risk management role that is leveraging the supply chain continuous monitoring tools for indications. are you sharing back and forth? So if I'm a larger organization, I'm going to make sure that I'm setting up that relationship and staying in touch with my, cyber threat intelligence team and counterintelligence team to gather information and to get feedback from them. Hey, I'm seeing this indication. Can you
Yeah.
can you confirm that this
Yeah.
is what's going on? And then the other way, they can help
Right.
feed information to me that I might then look at a continuous monitoring tool to say, hey, there's a heightened awareness of this supplier. I'm going to check my continuous monitoring intelligence to then incorporate. For smaller organizations, you have a little more flexibility to
Yeah.
unilaterally leverage the intelligence and work the vendor to address the intelligence indications that you're getting.
Right. At the same time, I think what you're saying also is that find a mechanism to make sure that you do get an integrated view of that third party. So you're not just addressing one area, that you understand the overall picture. Yeah.
Yeah, a big deal these
Yeah.
days, Atul, as you know, is breaking down silos
Yeah.
across the organization for effectiveness, and that definitely comes into play here.
Right. So Phil, I just wrote an article for Forbes.com. It got published today on automating risk management. When you think about automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and others, what are you seeing, or what's your desired state of application of some of these technologies in risk management?
I think setting the ability to set a meaningful threshold based upon my risk appetite model is a big deal. I can't boil the ocean. It is, we are just now coming into understanding what skill set is required to be able to analyze the intelligence that we are gathering. And so I think that, from if you will, that integrated view, that single pane of glass is really what I need to understand with the various intelligence feeds coming in to be able to synthesize that information, I think is going to become even more important. I have a continuous monitoring tool that has fantastic models on giving me the likelihood, the asset value, the importance, so that I can think where I want to focus my risk management activities, where it matters, the biggest bang for the buck, if you will, the areas
Yeah.
of higher concern and focus. But now to take that intelligence about my extended network, if you will, my supply chain ecosystem, and integrate that with internal dashboards, that's going to be very, very important.
Right. Risk management is a very, very exciting space, Phil. And you may have noticed recently that Bloomberg called risk manager a hot job. What do you think about that?
I think it's appropriate. I think that it is, I've enjoyed it even in the more narrow space that I've worked in, supply chain risk management, especially, as well as cybersecurity risk management. And I think that, that resonates with me. The obligation and responsibility of the C-suite is becoming very important. And so I can imagine that organizations that do not currently have, even mid-sized companies that do not currently have chief risk officers, will be establishing that role. Yeah, definitely resonates with me.
Wonderful. Two more questions, Phil. What do you rely on to make yourself a better risk leader? What resources do you rely on?
Atul, I rely a lot on reading the industry papers, staying informed, and especially through groups such as yours, such as the Risk Board, the shared assessment, with Santa Fe Group. I participate in many of those, panels and boards to stay informed, as well as outside reading. Then internally, of course, staying in touch with the various practitioners, because you have a lot of a wealth of knowledge of folks who are really smart, who have been in this practice probably folks who are listening to this have in their organization really smart people who have either grown up organically as I did or
Yeah.
have just come from a company that you can pick their brain and really learn a lot of current best practices. So I think that, discussion with your peer and colleague, is really important.
No, Phil, I think that's really good advice because too often I see leaders as they're moving up in an organization, they become more insular and don't give their time to activities like that. So that's really good advice. My final question, what advice would you give to future risk leaders?
I think to really start with two things. One is to really get a baseline in some area, whether it's supply chain risk management, whether it's consulting on security projects. If you're just starting out in your career, I think that to find an area where you can dig in and learn, from end to end, that process, that practice, and find a good mentor to help guide you. Hopefully, the right organization, you'll find somebody who's a good mentor. I think that's really important. I think the second thing is really to establish and identify a framework that you can learn, a baseline out there, because it's really important to contextualize, the practice of risk management within a framework. And there are a lot of them out there. If your organization doesn't have one, then just probably a quick Google, you'll be able to find enough reading material to be able to help you understand the fundamentals of risk management.
Good advice. Phil, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your thoughts on risk management and how to be a better risk leader. Thank you again.
Thank you, Atul. Appreciate the opportunity.